Future wife, I need to tell you something that sounds impossible, and yet it feels more true than many things I've spent my life believing. Sometimes I wonder if we've already met somewhere. Not necessarily in a crowded room where our eyes locked for a second. Not necessarily on a street, in a cafe, or during some moment I failed to notice. I mean somewhere deeper. Somewhere beyond introductions. Somewhere beyond timing. Because there have been moments in my life when everything looked successful from the outside. Yet inside there was a quiet room I could never fully fill. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever achieved something you once prayed for, only to realize there was still an empty chair in your heart? I have. For years, I thought the answer was to work harder, build more, become more, accomplish more. I believed love would arrive after everything else was finally perfect. But life has a strange way of teaching us lessons we never volunteered to learn. Sometimes the waiting isn't punishment. Sometimes the waiting is preparation. And what if the person we're searching for is being prepared too? What if two people can spend years growing separately, healing separately, becoming separately, before their roads finally meet? What if you're not behind? What if the waiting had a purpose? And what if love has been finding its way to you all along? If you've ever felt that strange sense that someone important is still out there, then stay with me. Because tonight I want to share the truth that changed everything I thought I knew about love. And maybe, just maybe, it will change something inside you too. Have you felt this too? The truth is, there was a time when I confused ambition with fulfillment. I thought if I could build enough, achieve enough, prove enough, then happiness would naturally follow. So I kept moving. I kept chasing. I kept convincing myself that the next milestone would finally feel like home. And for a while that belief kept me going. But every achievement has a quiet moment afterward. A moment when the applause fades. A moment when the notifications stop. A moment when the room becomes silent. And in that silence, something always returned. A question, a feeling, a presence that wasn't there. It felt strange because I couldn't explain it. Nothing was missing, and yet something was. Have you ever sat in a room full of people and still felt alone? Not because nobody loved you, not because nobody cared, but because there was a certain kind of connection your heart recognized before your mind could describe it. That's what it felt like. Like walking through a house with every light turned on while somehow still searching for the doorway home. I didn't understand it then. I thought loneliness meant the absence of people. But loneliness is often something much quieter. It's the distance between who we are and who we're becoming. It's the space between our present life and the life our heart quietly knows is possible. For years I carried that feeling, not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly, like a small stone in my pocket, always there, always reminding me. And the strange thing was that the more I grew, the more aware of it I became. Because growth has a way of revealing truths we can no longer hide from. The stronger I became, the more honest I had to be. The more successful I became, the more I realized success couldn't answer emotional questions. Look at me when I say this. No achievement can replace connection. No amount of recognition can replace being understood. No accomplishment can substitute for a heart that feels safe enough to rest. I know many people spend years trying to earn love through performance. I did. Maybe you have too. Maybe you've spent years becoming stronger because you were afraid to be vulnerable. Maybe you've spent years proving your worth because you secretly wondered if you were enough. Maybe you've spent years building walls so beautiful that nobody realized they were walls at all. Have you felt this too? Because if you have, I want you to know something. You are not difficult to love. You are not too late. You are not behind. Sometimes life asks us to become someone before it gives us someone. That distinction changed everything for me. I used to believe love was something you found. Now I think love is something you become ready to recognize. The difference matters, because when we believe love is merely something to find, we rush, we chase, we force, we panic. But when we understand that love is something we become ready for, patience begins to make sense. The waiting starts to feel different. Not easy, but meaningful. Like a seed growing beneath the soil. Invisible, silent, necessary. But here's the truth I've never told anyone. The hardest part wasn't being alone. The hardest part was trusting that being alone wasn't permanent. The hardest part was believing there was purpose in the silence, purpose in the waiting, purpose in the unanswered questions. Every day I wanted certainty. Life kept offering faith instead. Every day I wanted a map. Life kept offering a compass. And there is a difference. A map shows you exactly where you're going. A compass simply points you in the right direction. Love often works more like a compass. It doesn't reveal the whole journey. It asks for trust. It asks for patience. It asks for courage. And that frightened me. Because patience feels risky when your heart has been disappointed before. Yet every meaningful thing in life requires patience. Trust requires patience. Healing requires patience. Growth requires patience. Love requires patience. It requires patience. It requires presence. It requires us to show up. And then something unexpected happened. The older I became, the less interested I was in finding perfection. Instead, became interested in finding truth. I stopped asking, who completes me? And started asking, who reflects who I'm becoming? That question felt different, healthier, real. Because love isn't about finding someone who fills every empty space. Love is finding someone who stands beside you and helps you see yourself more clearly. Like a mirror. Not a mirror that judges. A mirror that reveals. A mirror that reminds you who you've always been underneath the fear. And perhaps that is why I began wondering about you. The woman I haven't met. Or maybe the woman I have already crossed paths with without realizing. Because somewhere deep inside I started feeling that neither of us was lost. We were simply becoming, preparing, growing, walking separate roads toward the same horizon. And maybe that's why the loneliness began to soften. Because I stopped seeing it as evidence that something was wrong. I started seeing it as evidence that something was still unfolding. What if you're not behind? What if the waiting had a purpose? What if the timing was protecting something precious? Those questions became small lights inside the darkness, like a lighthouse standing quietly on a distant shore, not pulling me forward, simply reminding me that land existed beyond the storm. And for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not loud hope. Not dramatic hope. Just enough hope to keep the door open. Just enough hope to believe that somewhere beyond today's horizon, two roads were slowly moving toward each other. And maybe one day, they would finally meet. There is something I have never been able to explain completely. Maybe you've experienced it too. Maybe you've met someone and within a few moments felt as though your heart already knew them. Not because you knew their story, not because you knew their favorite things, not because you knew where they had been, but because something inside you became strangely quiet, as if a part of your soul stopped searching for a moment. That feeling has fascinated me for years, because it doesn't follow logic, it doesn't ask permission, it arrives before explanation. And when it happens, we often spend weeks trying to understand what our heart recognized in seconds. I used to dismiss those moments. I told myself they were imagination, coincidence, wishful thinking. But the older I became, the more I noticed that life is full of things that exist before we understand them. A sunrise doesn't need our explanation to be beautiful. A lighthouse doesn't need our permission to guide ships home. And perhaps some connections don't need immediate answers either. Perhaps they simply need space. Space to unfold. Space to reveal themselves. Space to become what they were always meant to be. I remember walking through different seasons of my life, surrounded by people, conversations, opportunities, noise. And yet, every now and then, I would encounter someone who felt different. Not better, not more attractive, not more impressive. Different. There was a familiarity I couldn't place, a sense that our stories somehow understood each other, as though two travelers had been walking separate roads through the same storm. Have you felt this too? That strange feeling that you've arrived somewhere familiar even though you've never been there before? The feeling can be unsettling, beautiful, confusing, hopeful, all at once. Because it challenges the way we think love should work. We are taught that love begins with certainty, but often it begins with curiosity. A quiet curiosity, a gentle pull, a question. Why does this person feel familiar? Why do their words seem to echo inside me? Why does their presence feel like stepping into a room I've somehow visited before? For a long time, I thought familiarity meant sameness. Now I believe it means recognition, and those are not the same thing. Sameness is comfortable because it reflects our habits. Recognition is powerful because it reflects our truth. This is where everything I thought I knew changed. I stopped looking for someone who matched every preference. I stopped looking for someone who fit a list. I stopped searching for perfection. Instead, I began paying attention to how people made me feel. Not excitement, not obsession, not fantasy. Presence. Because true connection often feels less like fireworks and more like coming home. Less like chaos, more like peace. Less like chasing, more like arriving. Look at me when I say this. Peace is underrated. Many people mistake intensity for love. But intensity can come from fear. Intensity can come from uncertainty. Intensity can come from emotional hunger. Real connection often feels quieter, safer, steadier, like an open door that was never locked, like a quiet room where you no longer feel the need to perform, like taking off armor you didn't even realize you were wearing. And perhaps that's why some people feel familiar, not because we've known them forever, but because they allow us to become ourselves more quickly. Around them, we stop pretending. Around them, we stop managing every word. Around them, we stop trying to earn belonging. We simply belong. I didn't understand it then. I thought love would enter my life with noise. I thought it would announce itself dramatically. I thought there would be certainty from the beginning. Instead, life kept teaching me something softer, something wiser. The deepest things often arrive quietly, The most important doors rarely slam open. The most meaningful connections often begin with a whisper, a feeling, a glance, a conversation that lingers longer than expected. And then something unexpected happened. I began to wonder if familiarity wasn't about the past at all. What if it was about the future? What if certain people feel familiar because they reflect the person we're becoming? What if the mirror appears before the full reflection does? That thought stayed with me, because throughout life, growth often works that way. We sense change before we understand it. We feel transformation before we can explain it. And perhaps love is similar. Perhaps we recognize certain souls because they carry qualities our future self already understands. Kindness, patience, depth, courage, honesty, emotional safety. The very things we have been learning to cultivate ourselves. Maybe that's why recognition feels powerful. It isn't merely seeing another person, it's seeing a reflection of a journey, a reflection of lessons learned, a reflection of healing completed, a reflection of values earned through experience, like a mirror, not showing us who we are today, showing us who we have been becoming all along. And if that's true, then perhaps the feeling of familiarity has a beautiful purpose. Perhaps it reminds us that love isn't random, not because destiny controls every step, but because growth creates alignment. Two people come capable of seeing each other. Two hearts become capable of trusting each other. Two lives become capable of supporting each other. And when that happens, recognition becomes possible. Before you go, hear this one thing. If someone has not arrived yet, it does not mean your story is empty. If the connection you're hoping for hasn't appeared, it does not mean you've been forgotten. Sometimes life is still preparing the road. Sometimes the door is still opening. Sometimes the sunrise is already coming, even while the sky remains dark. What if love has been finding its way to you all along? What if every lesson you've learned has been teaching you how to recognize it? And what if the familiarity you're longing for is already moving toward you, one step at a time, from somewhere beyond today's horizon? Those questions stayed with me, and they would eventually teach me something even more important, because recognition alone is not enough. Timing matters too, and that lesson changed everything. For a long time, I believed that wanting something badly enough would make it happen. Maybe that's how many of us learn to move through life. We work harder, push further, refuse to quit. And in many areas of life, that approach works. Effort creates progress. Discipline creates growth. Persistence creates opportunity. But love taught me a different lesson. A lesson I resisted for years, because love does not always respond to force. Love responds to readiness, and readiness cannot be rushed. That truth was difficult for me to accept, because when your heart longs for something, patience can feel unfair. When you're tired of waiting, every delay feels personal. When you see others finding happiness, it's easy to wonder if you've somehow missed your chance. Have you felt this too? Have you ever looked at your life and quietly asked, when will it be my turn? I have. More times than I can count. There were seasons when I thought I was ready. Seasons when I believed I had finally become the person I needed to be. Seasons when I thought the waiting should be over, and yet life remained silent. At least that's how it appeared. But silence can be deceptive, because growth often happens where nothing seems to be happening. A tree grows roots long before anyone sees branches. A sunrise begins before the horizon changes color. A journey home starts before the traveler sees the house. And love often works the same way. The preparation begins before the arrival. I didn't understand it then. I thought timing was simply about dates and circumstances. Now I think timing is often about becoming. Becoming patient enough, becoming honest enough, becoming healed enough, becoming courageous enough. Not perfect, never perfect, just ready. Ready to receive what we once would have mishandled. Look at me when I say this. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not receiving something. Sometimes it is being prepared for it. Because what good is a beautiful relationship if we don't yet know how to protect it? What good is deep connection if we still run from vulnerability? What good is emotional safety if we haven't learned how to create it ourselves? These questions changed me. They forced me to stop focusing on what I lacked and start focusing on who I was becoming. And that shift transformed everything, because the waiting no longer felt empty. The waiting became meaningful. Every disappointment became a teacher. Every heartbreak became a lesson. Every closed door became a redirection. Not punishment, preparation. But here's the truth I've never told anyone. There were moments when I almost gave up believing that. Moments when patience felt impossible. Moments when I wondered whether hope was simply another word for denial. Those were difficult days. The kind of days when the future feels hidden behind fog. The kind of days when every unanswered question feels heavier than usual. And yet something inside me kept whispering, "Keep going." Not because answers had arrived. Not because certainty existed, but because growth was still happening, even when I couldn't see it. Especially when I couldn't see it. And then something unexpected happened. I started noticing a pattern. Many of the things I was grateful for today would have been impossible for me to appreciate years earlier. I wasn't ready then. Not because I lacked desire, because I lacked perspective. There is a difference. Desire says, "I want this now." Wisdom asks, "Am I ready to care for it?" That distinction changed the way I viewed love, because love is not merely receiving a gift. Love is becoming someone who can honor the gift after it arrives. And that requires growth, sometimes years of growth. Sometimes seasons of healing we never expected. Sometimes learning lessons we never volunteered to learn. Have you felt this too? Have you ever looked back and realized that something arriving later actually protected you? Protected your heart. Protected your future. Protected something precious that wasn't ready yet. I think many of us underestimate the role timing plays in our lives. We celebrate outcomes, but we rarely celebrate preparation. Yet preparation is where the transformation happens. Preparation is where character is built. Preparation is where trust develops. Preparation is where emotional maturity grows roots. Like a lighthouse standing through countless storms before guiding a single ship safely home. Like an open door being crafted long before anyone walks through it. Like two roads slowly bending toward one another across a vast landscape. Separate, independent, unaware, and yet moving toward the same destination. That image stayed with me. Two roads meeting. Not because one chased the other, not because one forced the journey, because both continued becoming what they were meant to become. And when the time was right, they met naturally. That was the moment everything became clear. The right relationship is not built on urgency. It is built on readiness, not on fear of being alone, but on the ability to share life meaningfully, not on rescuing each other, but on supporting each other, not on filling emptiness, but on expanding fullness. This realization softened something inside me. The pressure began to disappear. The desperation faded. The fear started losing its grip because I no longer saw waiting as evidence that something was wrong. I saw it as evidence that life was still working, still shaping, still preparing, still teaching. And perhaps that is true for you as well. What if you're not behind? What if the waiting had a purpose? What if the timing was protecting something precious? Those questions became companions during difficult seasons. Whenever doubt appeared, they reminded me that growth is rarely visible in real time. Only in hindsight. Only when we look back. Only when we see how every experience connected to something larger than itself. Before you go, hear this one thing. If your heart is tired of waiting, I understand. If you're wondering whether love still has a place in your future, I understand. If you're questioning the timing of your life, I understand. But don't mistake delay for denial. Don't mistake preparation for absence. And don't mistake the current chapter for the entire story. Because timing is not always withholding something from you. Sometimes timing is protecting something for you. And that lesson prepared me for another truth. A truth about trust. Because even when the timing is right, love asks something difficult of us. It asks us to believe again after disappointment. And that may be the hardest lesson of all. There is a kind of pain that changes the way you look at the world. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that settles into your heart and teaches you to be careful. The kind that convinces you that protecting yourself is wiser than opening yourself. The kind that whispers, "Don't risk that again." I know that voice. For a long time, I listened to it. After disappointment, trust becomes complicated. Not because we stop wanting connection, but because connection begins to feel dangerous. We remember the promises that faded, the conversations that ended, the expectations that dissolved into silence. And without realizing it, we start building walls, beautiful walls, strong walls, reasonable walls, walls that make perfect sense, at least at first. Have you felt this too? Have you ever convinced yourself that you were protecting your heart only to discover you were also protecting yourself from joy? I have, more than once. Because pain has a strange way of disguising itself as wisdom. It tells us we're being realistic. It tells us we're being smart. It tells us we're avoiding future disappointment. But sometimes what we're actually avoiding is possibility. I didn't understand it then. I thought healing meant becoming invulnerable. I thought strength meant never needing anyone. I thought maturity meant expecting less. But life kept teaching me something different. Healing is not learning how to feel less. Healing is learning how to feel without fear, controlling every decision. There is a difference, a profound difference. One path closes the heart, the other strengthens it. One path creates distance, the other creates freedom. And for years I stood between those two paths without realizing it. Because disappointment leaves marks. Even when the wounds are invisible, even when nobody else can see them, the heart remembers. The heart remembers promises. The heart remembers absences. The heart remembers moments when it hoped for one thing and received another, and trust becomes difficult. Not because we are weak, because we are human. Look at me when I say this. There is nothing wrong with being cautious. There is nothing wrong with protecting your peace. There is nothing wrong with honoring what you've survived. But eventually, healing asks a difficult question. Will you allow yesterday's pain to decide tomorrow's possibilities? That question stayed with me because the honest answer wasn't always flattering. Sometimes I was letting old disappointments shape new opportunities. Sometimes I was judging future connections through the lens of past experiences. Sometimes I was expecting people who hadn't hurt me to pay the price for people who had. And that realization humbled me, because trust is not merely believing in another person. Trust is believing that your heart can survive uncertainty. Trust is believing that vulnerability is still worthwhile. Trust is believing that love deserves another chance. But here's the truth I've never told anyone. The most difficult person to trust again wasn't someone else. It was myself. I trusted my ambitions. I trusted my skills. I trusted my ability to solve problems. Yet, after disappointment, I sometimes stopped trusting my own heart. I questioned my judgment, my instincts, my ability to recognize what was real. And that kind of doubt can quietly shape an entire life. Because when we stop trusting ourselves, every decision becomes heavier. Every possibility becomes scarier. Every open door becomes harder to walk through. And then something unexpected happened. I began looking at trust differently. I stopped seeing trust as certainty. I started seeing trust as courage. Because certainty requires no bravery. Certainty demands nothing from us. Courage is different. Courage moves forward without guarantees. Courage keeps the heart open despite risk. Courage believes something beautiful remains possible, even after disappointment, especially after disappointment. That realization changed everything. Because suddenly, trust wasn't about predicting outcomes. It wasn't about knowing exactly how things would unfold. It was about showing up honestly, showing up authentically, showing up with enough faith to remain open, like an open door, not forcing anyone to enter, simply refusing to lock itself out of fear. That image stayed with me, an open door, not reckless. Not naive, simply available, because every meaningful relationship requires openness. Every meaningful connection requires vulnerability. Every meaningful love story requires trust, not perfect trust, growing trust, patient trust. The kind of trust built through consistency rather than promises. The kind of trust built through presence rather than words. Presence matters more than grand gestures, more than impressive speeches, more than perfect plans. Presence says, I'm here. Presence says, you don't have to carry everything alone. Presence says, I see you. And perhaps that is why emotional safety matters so much. Because trust does not grow where fear dominates. Trust grows where honesty is welcomed, where imperfections are allowed, where vulnerability is respected, where two people can be human without feeling judged. Have you felt this too? The longing not merely to be loved, but to be understood, not merely to be admired, but to be accepted, not merely to be wanted, but to feel safe. I think that longing exists in all of us, because beneath every ambition, every achievement, every goal, there is often a simpler desire to belong, to be known, to be met with kindness. And when that happens, something remarkable occurs. The walls begin to lower, the armor becomes lighter, the heart starts breathing again, like a quiet room slowly filling with morning light, like darkness making room for sunrise, like a lighthouse finally visible after a long storm. That was the moment everything became clear. Trust isn't the reward at the end of love. Trust is the bridge that allows love to begin. Without it, every relationship becomes a negotiation. With it, connection becomes possible. And perhaps the greatest act of courage is choosing to trust again after life has given you reasons not to. Not blindly, not carelessly, but intentionally. Because hope always requires courage. Before you go, hear this one thing. Your disappointments are part of your story, but they are not the author of your future. Your heartbreaks matter, but they do not define what comes next. Your past deserves respect, but it does not deserve control, because love asks something beautiful of us, not perfection, not certainty, just willingness. The willingness to open the door one more time. The willingness to believe again. The willingness to trust that the right connection will feel different from the ones that taught us difficult lessons. And once I understood that, I began seeing another truth, a truth about recognition, because not every connection that excites us is meant for us, and not every person who enters our life is meant to stay. The difference between attraction and true recognition would become one of the most important lessons I ever learned. There was a time when I thought love was easy to identify. I believed that if my heart raced, it must be real. If I couldn't stop thinking about someone, it must be destiny. If the connection felt powerful, it must be right. But life has a way of separating what feels intense from what is actually true. And that lesson took me years to understand. Because attraction is immediate. Recognition is gradual. Attraction captures attention. Recognition captures the soul. Attraction often says, I want. Recognition quietly asks, do I understand? For a long time, I confused those two voices. Maybe you have too. Have you ever met someone who completely occupied your thoughts, only to realize later that you were more attached to the idea of them than the reality? Have you ever fallen in love with a possibility instead of a person? I think many of us have. Not because we're foolish, because we're hopeful. And hope can sometimes paint beautiful pictures before we have all the facts. I didn't understand it then. I thought love would always arrive wearing excitement. I thought it would always feel dramatic. I thought certainty would be instant. Instead, life kept introducing me to a quieter truth. The deepest connections often reveal themselves slowly, like a sunrise, not all at once, minute by minute, light by light, until one day you realize the darkness is gone. That realization changed how I viewed relationships. Because attraction asks, how do I feel about this person? Recognition asks, who do I become around this person? The difference is everything. One focuses on desire, the other focuses on truth. One can be created by fantasy, the other can only be revealed through experience. Look at me when I say this. Anyone can make your heart race. Not everyone can make your heart feel safe. Anyone can create excitement. Not everyone can create peace. Anyone can capture your attention. Not everyone can earn your trust. And trust matters more than chemistry, more than charm, more than perfect timing. Because trust creates the foundation where real love can grow. Without trust, attraction eventually becomes exhausting. With trust, even ordinary moments become meaningful. That was one of the most surprising discoveries of my life. Real connection often hides inside simple moments. A conversation that lasts longer than expected. A silence that doesn't feel uncomfortable. A feeling of being understood without having to explain everything. A sense that you can finally stop performing, stop proving, stop pretending, Just be. And then something unexpected happened. I stopped asking whether someone was impressive. I started asking whether they felt like home. Not home as a place. Home as a feeling of acceptance, a feeling of peace, a feeling of emotional safety. Because the truth is, many people can inspire admiration. Far fewer inspire trust. And trust is where love begins to reveal its deeper nature. But here's the truth I've never told anyone. For years, I was searching for someone extraordinary. What I eventually discovered was something far more beautiful. I wasn't searching for extraordinary. I was searching for genuine kindness, genuine honesty, genuine patience, genuine presence, the qualities that don't always capture attention immediately, but become priceless over time. Because attraction often focuses on moments. Recognition focuses on character. Attraction notices appearance. Recognition notices consistency. Attraction asks what someone can give us. Recognition appreciates who someone truly is. And perhaps that's why recognition feels different. It isn't driven by scarcity. It isn't driven by fear. It isn't driven by urgency. It grows through understanding, like two travelers gradually realizing they are walking toward the same destination, like two roads slowly moving toward a meeting point, like two mirrors reflecting not perfection but growth. The mirror became an important symbol for me, because true love does not complete us. True love reflects us, not the version we pretend to be, the version we have been becoming all along, the courageous version, the healed version, the honest version, the version that no longer needs to hide. Have you felt this too? The desire to be truly seen, not admired, seen, not praised, known, not idealized, understood. I think that desire lives deep inside every human heart. Because being seen is one of the purest forms of love. Being accepted is one of the safest places a soul can rest. And when those two things come together, recognition becomes possible. This is where everything I thought I knew changed. I realized that true recognition isn't about finding someone who fulfills every fantasy. It's finding someone whose reality feels better than fantasy. Someone whose presence brings clarity rather than confusion. Someone whose consistencies matters more than promises. Someone who helps you grow rather than distracts you from growth. Someone who encourages you to become more yourself, not less. That kind of connection is rare, not because there are few good people, because it requires readiness from both hearts. It requires maturity, patience, honesty, shared values, shared purpose, the willingness to build rather than merely dream. And that realization brought tremendous peace into my life. Because I stopped chasing feelings. I started paying attention to foundations. I stopped pursuing intensity. I started valuing stability. I stopped looking for perfection. I started appreciating authenticity, like a lighthouse. Steady, reliable, consistent, present through every season. Because real love doesn't merely appear during beautiful weather. Real love remains when storms arrive. And that is how recognition separates itself from attraction. Attraction often disappears when reality becomes difficult. Recognition deepens. Attraction asks for excitement. Recognition creates commitment. Attraction notices potential. Recognition values character. Before you go, hear this one thing. Never confuse being captivated with being connected. Never confuse intensity with intimacy. And never confuse fantasy with truth. The right connection will not simply make your heart beat faster. It will make your heart feel safer. It will help you breathe easier. It will remind you that love is not something we chase. It is something we build together, patiently, purposefully. And that realization opened the door to another lesson. Because once recognition becomes clear, something important must follow. A shared purpose, not merely a shared feeling, a shared direction, a shared vision, a shared journey. And that lesson would teach me what lasting love is truly made of. There is a moment in every meaningful relationship when the question changes. At first, we ask, "How do I feel?" Later, if the connection is real, a different question appears. Where are we going? That question used to intimidate me, because feelings are easy to discuss, dreams are easy to imagine, possibilities are easy to romanticize. But building something together, that requires intention, that requires effort, that requires purpose. And purpose is where love begins to reveal its true strength. I didn't understand it then. I thought the perfect relationship would simply happen. I thought if two people cared enough, everything else would naturally fall into place. Life taught me otherwise. Because feelings create beginnings. Purpose creates endurance. Feelings open the door. Purpose helps people walk through it together. Without shared purpose, even strong emotions can drift apart. With shared purpose, ordinary moments become extraordinary. Have you felt this too? Have you ever met someone and realized the most beautiful thing about them wasn't how they made you feel? It was how they inspired you to live, how they encouraged growth, how they reminded you of what mattered, how they helped your life move in a meaningful direction. That realization changed everything for me, because I stopped looking at love as an escape. I started seeing love as a partnership, not a rescue, not a fantasy, a partnership. Two people choosing the same direction, two people carrying the same values, two people helping each other become more fully themselves. Look at me when I say this. The strongest relationships are not built on constant excitement. They are built on shared commitment, shared honesty, shared effort, shared purpose. The world often celebrates chemistry, but chemistry alone cannot build a future. Chemistry cannot replace character. Chemistry cannot replace trust. Chemistry cannot replace the daily choice to care for something together. Purpose can. Purpose transforms affection into action. Purpose transforms connection into commitment. Purpose transforms love into something that lasts. And then something unexpected happened. I began noticing that every meaningful thing in life requires construction. A home is built. Trust is built. Friendship is built. Character is built. Why should love be any different? Yet many of us enter relationships expecting them to survive on feelings alone. When feelings change, we panic. When challenges appear, we worry. When life becomes difficult, we wonder if something is wrong. But perhaps nothing is wrong. Perhaps we have simply arrived at the place where love becomes real. The place where building begins. Because building requires patience. Building requires consistency. Building requires showing up when emotions are strong and when they are quiet. It requires presence, presence, presence. I keep returning to that word because it matters. More than promises, more than plans, more than beautiful speeches. Presence is where trust grows. Presence is where safety develops. Presence is where intimacy deepens. A person who is present tells you something powerful. without speaking a word. They tell you, you matter. They tell you, I'm here. They tell you, we are building this together. And perhaps that is what every heart truly longs for. Not perfection, partnership. Not fantasy, faithfulness. Not endless excitement. Enduring presence. But here's the truth I've never told anyone. For years, I believed love would solve my loneliness. Eventually, I discovered something far more meaningful. Love doesn't solve loneliness by itself. Love creates connection through shared purpose. There is a difference. Because loneliness is not always the absence of people. Sometimes it is the absence of shared meaning, the absence of being understood, the absence of walking towards something important with another human being. And when purpose enters a relationship, something remarkable happens. Two lives begin expanding rather than merely combining. Two dreams begin supporting each other. Two journeys begin moving in the same direction, like two roads finally meeting, not losing their identity, not disappearing into each other, meeting, connecting, continuing forward together. That image stayed with me. Two roads meeting, because healthy love is not about becoming less yourself. It is about becoming more fully yourself while supporting someone else doing the same. The right relationship does not shrink your world. It expands it. The right relationship does not demand that you abandon your purpose. It strengthens your ability to pursue it. The right relationship becomes a source of energy rather than exhaustion, a source of peace rather than confusion, a source of clarity rather than chaos. Have you felt this too? The desire to build something meaningful with someone, not merely to share moments, but to share direction, to create memories, to overcome challenges, to grow stronger together. I think that longing exists because we were never meant to carry every burden alone. We were never meant to walk every road by ourselves. We were never meant to hide our dreams inside a quiet room where nobody else can see them. Purpose invites those dreams into the light. Purpose turns hope into action. Purpose gives love a destination. And this is where everything I thought I knew changed. I realized that lasting love is not found. It is built. Brick by brick, conversation by conversation, choice by choice, day by day. The strongest relationships are not miracles. They are commitments. They are two people choosing each other repeatedly, especially when life becomes difficult. Especially when growth requires patience, especially when circumstances test their faith. Like a lighthouse standing through storms, like an open door remaining open, like a sunrise returning after darkness. Those symbols began connecting for me. The lighthouse represented consistency. The open door represented trust. The sunrise represented hope. And together they revealed something beautiful. Real love is not a single moment. Real love is a journey shared by two people willing to grow together. Before you go, hear this one thing. Never underestimate the power of shared purpose. Feelings may begin a relationship. Purpose helps sustain it. Attraction may open the door. Commitment helps keep it open. Recognition may bring two hearts together. Purpose gives them somewhere meaningful to go. And once I understood that, another truth emerged. Perhaps the deepest purpose of love is not merely companionship. Perhaps love exists to show us who we are becoming, like a mirror, and that realization would change everything once again. The older I become, the more I believe that love is one of life's most honest mirrors, not because it shows us perfection, because it shows us truth. And truth, if we're willing to face it, changes everything. For years, I thought a relationship was about finding someone who would make me happy, someone who would bring peace into my life, someone who would fill whatever was missing. But life kept leading me toward a different understanding. The right person doesn't simply add something to your life. They reveal something, something that was already there, something waiting to be seen, something waiting to be accepted, like a mirror quietly reflecting an image we had overlooked for years. I didn't understand it then. I thought love would show me who another person was. Instead, it began showing me who I was, my fears, my hopes, my insecurities, my strengths, my capacity to trust, my willingness to grow. Everything became visible, because genuine connection has a way of illuminating the parts of ourselves we can no longer ignore. Have you felt this too? Have you ever cared about someone deeply and suddenly found yourself confronting emotions you thought you had already resolved? Old wounds, old doubts, old stories about your worth. It happens because love is not only about connection, it is also about reflection. And reflection can be uncomfortable before it becomes beautiful. Look at me when I say this. Growth rarely feels like growth while it's happening. It often feels like uncertainty. It often feels like discomfort. It often feels like being stretched beyond familiar boundaries. Yet those moments are often where transformation begins, because every meaningful relationship invites us into a deeper version of ourselves. Not by demanding it, by revealing it. A loving mirror doesn't criticize. A loving mirror clarifies. It helps us see who we are beneath fear, beneath ego, beneath disappointment, beneath the protective stories we've carried for years. And that realization changed how I viewed relationships forever. I stopped asking, what can this person give me? I started asking, what is this connection helping me become? The answer mattered far more, because the strongest relationships don't merely create happiness. They create growth. Growth in patience. Growth in compassion. Growth in courage. Growth in understanding. Growth in love. And then something unexpected happened. I began noticing that every meaningful relationship in my life had acted as a mirror in some way. Some reflected lessons, some reflected wounds, some reflected strengths, some reflected possibilities. Each one showed me something valuable, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. Because every experience carried a lesson hidden beneath the surface, a lesson about boundaries, a lesson about trust, a lesson about self-respect, a lesson about what truly matters. At the time, I often focused on the disappointment. Years later, I saw the growth. Years later, I saw the preparation. Years later, I saw how each chapter had been shaping me into someone more capable of loving well. That was the moment everything became clear. Nothing had been wasted. Not the heartbreak, not the waiting, not the uncertainty, not the lonely seasons. All of it had contributed to the person I was becoming, and perhaps the same is true for you. What if you're not behind? What if every experience has been preparing you? What if every lesson has been helping you recognize the kind of love your heart truly needs? Those questions stayed with me, because they transformed regret into gratitude. And gratitude changes the way we see everything. When we view life through regret, we focus on what didn't happen. When we view life through gratitude, we notice what was learned. And learning creates wisdom. Wisdom creates readiness. Readiness creates recognition. The pieces began fitting together. The waiting, the growth, the trust, the purpose, all of it connected, like separate roads gradually revealing the same destination, like a sunrise slowly illuminating a landscape that had always been there, like an open door we finally realize has been waiting for us all along. But here's the truth I've never told anyone. The most beautiful realization wasn't discovering that someone else might be meant for me. The most beautiful realization was discovering that I was becoming someone capable of recognizing them. There is power in that understanding, because it shifts our focus away from chasing, away from fear, away from scarcity, and toward growth, toward character, toward becoming. The right relationship is not a reward given to perfect people. It is a connection shared by two people willing to keep growing, two people willing to remain honest, two people willing to choose each other while continuing to evolve, like mirrors facing one another, reflecting possibility, reflecting truth, reflecting hope, not demanding perfection, encouraging growth. That image stayed with me. Two mirrors, two reflections, two lives helping each other become more fully themselves. Perhaps that is one of love's greatest gifts. Not completion, expansion, not rescue, revelation, not escape, transformation. Have you felt this too? The desire not merely to be loved but to become, not merely to receive affection but to share purpose. Not merely to find someone, but to grow alongside someone. I think that longing exists because love was never meant to stop our journey. Love deepens the journey. Love enriches the journey. Love gives the journey new meaning. And once I understood that, fear began losing its power. Because if love is connected to growth, then waiting is not failure. Waiting is preparation. Growth is progress. Becoming is progress. Learning is progress. Healing is progress. Every step matters. Every lesson matters. Every season matters. Before you go, hear this one thing. The person you're becoming matters just as much as the person you're hoping to meet, maybe even more. Because one day, when the timing is right, recognition will happen. And when it does, it won't simply be because two people found each other. It will be because two people became capable of seeing each other clearly, like mirrors reflecting the truth they were always meant to reveal. And that realization leads to the final lesson, a lesson about hope, a lesson about timing. A lesson about the quiet beauty of knowing that neither heart is late. Both hearts are simply becoming. If you've stayed with me this far, there is one final truth I want to leave with you. Not as advice, not as instruction, but as a quiet blessing from one heart to another. Because after all the lessons, all the waiting, all the questions, this is what I have come to believe. Love is rarely late, life is rarely random, and becoming is rarely wasted. For years I measured my life by arrivals, the goals I reached, the dreams I achieved, the milestones I crossed. But now, when I look back, I see something different. I see preparation, I see growth, I see invisible work happening beneath the surface. The kind of work nobody applauds, the kind of work nobody notices. The kind of work that changes everything. I see a younger version of myself desperately trying to force doors open, and I feel compassion for him, because he didn't yet understand that some doors open only when both people are ready to walk through them. He thought love was something to chase. He didn't yet know that love often arrives while we're busy becoming. I didn't understand it then. I thought every delay meant something was wrong. I thought every disappointment meant I had failed. I thought every lonely season was evidence that I had somehow missed my chance. But life kept whispering a gentler truth, a wiser truth, a truth I want to share with you now. You have not missed your chance, not because I know your future, because I understand growth, and growth has its own timing. The seed does not become a tree overnight. The sunrise does not appear all at once. The lighthouse is not built in a day. Everything meaningful unfolds gradually. Love is no different. Have you felt this too? The fear that perhaps everyone else is moving forward while you remain standing still. The fear that perhaps your moment should have happened already. The fear that perhaps you are somehow behind. I know that feeling. I know how convincing it can be. But what if it isn't true? What if you're not behind? What if you're exactly where your growth needs you to be? What if the waiting had a purpose? What if the timing was protecting something precious? Those questions changed my life because they taught me to stop measuring progress only by visible results. Some progress happens internally. Some progress happens quietly. Some progress happens in the hidden places of the heart, the places where patience grows, where wisdom grows, where trust grows, where character grows. And those things matter. They matter more than we often realize. Look at M.